Hi scholars, the title of this presentation is Individualized Education Programs, or IEPs, for general education teachers in elementary and middle level education. The three main topics are 1. What is the IEP? 2. What is my role in an IEP? And 3. How should I read and prioritize information in an IEP? What is an IEP? An IEP is a written statement of the educational program designed to meet a child's individual needs. Every child who receives special education services must have an IEP. The IEP has two general purposes. 1, to set reasonable learning goals for a child with a disability, and 2, to state the services that the school district will provide for the child to meet disability-related needs. A note about IEPs. Having a disability does not automatically mean that a child will have an IEP. A comprehensive evaluation conducted by a multidisciplinary team is required to document that the disability has an adverse effect on the child's education, therefore requiring special education services defined under the 2004 reauthorization of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. The role of the general education teacher is fourfold with respect to IEPs. First, they give input on curricular and developmental expectations. For example, a second grade teacher might share what typical writing samples look like in the beginning, middle, and end of the year, so that the IEP team can set an ambitious yet achievable IEP goal for a student with a disability. Second, a general education teacher serves the role of implementing accommodations. For example, this might look like reading aloud non-reading tests, making a seating chart with consideration for preferential seating, or providing time and a half on time-limited tasks, among others. Third, the general education teacher ensures that data are collected for IEP goals that relate to academic areas such as reading, writing, or mathematics, or functional performance areas such as using self-management skills that they directly observe in their classrooms. For example, if a student has a goal related to self-advocacy, you might directly observe how often the student uses I statements to express needs in your class. Fourth, your role includes consultation in which you can give input on how well the student is performing in academic and functional areas based on your observations of them during your class. When you receive access to the student's individualized education plan, the written document that details the components of the individualized education program, there are 10 main sections that you should look for and read carefully. This slide, titled Reading the IEP, uses the letters A through J to list the 10 components. A, student information section. B, meeting participants. C, strengths. D, current academic achievement and functional performance. E, special factors. F, effects of disability. G, disability-related needs. H, measurable annual goals. I, supplementary aids and services. J, related services. On the remaining slides, I will provide additional information about what to look for in each section, followed by a slide with sample contents from a case student's IEP. In the student information section, read to learn the child's birth date, month, year, and grade level. This might help you see if their chronological age falls within the range of peers without disabilities. Also review the contact information, address, phone, to ensure that it's consistent with other records you have. Finally, review the child's placement, their home district and current district, to see whether the child is receiving special education services in their home school district. For our case student Maurice, a lot of the information is listed as non-applicable because he is a hypothetical student. Actual IEPs will list information rather than use NA. What's important to note is that the date of the IEP meeting, or the date of which the IEP was developed, and the primary disability area are not included in this section. Maurice is a student with a hearing impairment, but this specific disability classification is part of Maurice's evaluation and eligibility paperwork, not his annual IEP document. Know that you can ask the special education teacher to give you this piece of information so that you have knowledge of the child's primary disability. The meeting participants section is simply a record of who was in attendance at the meeting. Attendance does not signify agreement with the content of the document. At minimum, the special education teacher, related service provider, general education teacher for the grade level of the child's enrollment, the parent or guardian of the child, and an administrator or LEA, local education agency representative, are required to attend the meeting. Any one of these essential members can be excused only if there is sufficient evidence to warrant the individual's absence from the meeting. For the hypothetical student Maurice, we can see that the relevant team members were in attendance: the parent, the general education teacher, the special education teacher, the director of special education, an itinerant teacher, and an assistive technology specialist. Often the school principal attends the meeting, but in this case, the director of special education was the administrator who could make budget-related decisions. Her name is listed as LEA, local education agency representative. The strengths section of the IEP should help you to ascertain areas that the child prefers, has interest in, and excels in. Strengths can include relative strengths, such as is better at math computation than math problem solving. Maurice's strength section is ideal for a few reasons. First, there is a wealth of objective information. There are 9 sentences altogether, and most of them reach beyond subjective, judgment-based ideas. For example, instead of stopping at the descriptors of energetic and curious, the writer tells us how a play-oriented approach serves to foster his engagement, enrich his language skills, and promote his independence. The most important information to ascertain from this section of the IEP is a snapshot of the assets the student brings to learning. By reading the student strengths section, you should be able to find ideas for how you can best set up your instruction to promote success for the student. In poor examples, you might find a dearth of unhelpful information. For example, you might simply find a phrase like, Savannah attends school regularly. It's a very small amount of information. Devante is pleasant and friendly. Neither of these statements provide objective details that can help us understand the relative areas of strength for Savannah or Dante. It can't uncover any skills that they excel in. It can't help us understand what they're interested in and what we might include in our instruction to be sure that we're connecting with these strengths that the students have. So you can raise questions when you're sitting at the IEP meeting table so that the strengths section provides a complete snapshot of all assets rather than a dearth of information that's just subjective and superficial. The current academic achievement and functional performance section gives you baseline information about what the child knows and can do on the date at which the IEP is written. The IEP lives for 12 months, which may or may not correspond with the start of a school year. For academic achievement, expect to read information about reading, writing, and mathematics. For functional performance, expect to read information about self-help, self-advocacy, transitioning from class to class, or activity to activity. Check that the statements in this current academic achievement and functional performance section come from multiple data sources. The acronym RIOT, R-I-O-T, can help us remember that we need data from a records review, like attendance records, for example, interview data, like statement from the students about their perceptions of themselves as a learner, their most or least favorite topics, observation, notes from an observer who records what a student does and says during a structured observation, testing, which can include standardized tests, curriculum-based measures, curriculum-based assessments. Information on what the child knows and can do should come from multiple sources, not just one single test score. For Maurice, the headings reading, writing, and mathematics are used in his current academic achievement statements. These headings are followed by data-based sentences that give us information about the skills that Maurice has with respect to where his knowledge and performance is expected to be. Maurice's functional performance gives us information about the level of independence with which he follows routines, the physical coordination and mental maps that he uses to navigate within and beyond the classroom, and his communication skills. The special factors section of the IEP lists 5 areas. These are essentially 5 yes/no questions. First, behavior intervention plan. Does the student need support, including specially designed instruction, to perform or develop skills related to social, emotional, or behavioral regulation? If that's marked yes, there should be a behavior intervention plan attached in the IEP. Second, English learner status. Does the student speak a home language other than or in addition to English? Are they in the process of developing English proficiency? If that's marked yes, they should receive language assistance from a bilingual or ESL teacher in addition to special education services. This is both and, not either or. Third, blind or visual impairment. Does the student need supports and services related to low vision or blindness? Fourth, communication supports. This should be yes when a child has a hearing impairment or when the child uses augmentative alternative communication devices. Fifth, assistive technology should be yes in most cases where support is needed to aid the child in demonstrating functional or academic performance commensurate with same age peers. When assistive technology is marked no, this kind of sends up a red flag, like maybe there hasn't been enough consideration to the child's functioning across domains, across settings to see what tools, aids, devices might help them perform with greater independence. For Maurice, the special factors section notes that he does not have a behavior plan, he is not an English learner, he is not blind or visually impaired. He does have communication needs due to bilateral hearing loss. He uses gestures, pointing, and basic signs from ASL. Relatedly, he uses an assistive listening device, an FM microphone, from the start of the day to the end of the day. For the effects of the disability section, you will be able to read the ways in which the disability has an impact on the student at school. Again, you might not see the specific label of the student's eligibility, but you should be able to gain a concise summary of why the child is receiving special education services. For Maurice, we can read and learn that his hearing loss impacts the areas of language development and communication. There are 4 statements that summarize disability-related needs for Maurice. at least one IEP goal is required for each disability-related needs statement. We see disability-related needs statement 1 is literacy. He needs to build communication skills, so he has a foundation for literacy. Disability-related need 2 is writing. He needs to use shapes and lines to accurately convey meaning in writing. Disability-related need 3 is math. Maurice needs to develop his early math skills to understand counting, grouping, and number recognition. And disability-related need 4 is self-advocacy. He needs to develop skills in self-advocacy by independently managing his auditory equipment. Section H, the IEP goals. There should be measurable annual goal statements. Read the statement to find the specific skill or behavior being addressed. Read to find what the expected performance level or criteria for attainment are. Check to see whether the goal is aligned to an on-grade level standard. Most IEPs should be aligned to grade level standards. Check to see whether the goal is aligned to an alternate or extended standard. Approximately 2% of the IEPs for a school district will be aligned to alternate or extended standards. That means that most of the IEPs you read should align to the on-grade level standard. Most IEP goals should. Maurice should have at least 4 IEP goals because there are 4 disability-related needs statements. The first goal for Maurice relates to reading and states, given a short story, Maurice will answer simple comprehension questions about features in the story, such as identifying the character and setting, retelling the main idea, and sequencing events after 3 repeated readings. The baseline percentage is listed as 0. So we know that Maurice is not yet answering simple comprehension questions after 3 repeated readings. The level of attainment states 3 out of 4 story features. This is a bit vague, but it suggests that Maurice would need to answer 3 of 4 questions correctly related to story features or narrative elements. In brief, Maurice is expected to improve comprehension question answering accuracy from 0% to 75% by the end of the IEP term. The next goal relates to building fluency with symbol, sound, sign, correspondence for the 26 letters of the alphabet. Maurice's third goal relates to writing. He is expected to write labels to pictures using 1 to 2 words in 75% of opportunities. What's not clear is how often this will occur. From the way the goal is written, we can't quite ascertain whether there are daily or weekly opportunities for data to be collected to evaluate progress toward goal attainment. Maurice's fourth goal relates to language or expressive vocabulary used during math instruction. He is expected to independently use math terms to count, sort, and classify by size, shape, and color. The measurability of the goal is somewhat unclear here. The baseline indicates 25%, but does not tell us how this is derived. For example, is he given a weekly performance assessment where he's given a set of 4 objects and asked to use color words and size words to sort them? Is the 25% an indication that he only sorted 3 out of 4 objects correctly, or that he only used 3 out of 4 terms correctly? It's difficult to interpret how he will reach 95% for the level of attainment when there's so much ambiguity. In your role, you can ask questions to clarify the goal's intended meaning, and you can advocate for revisions to the IEP so that there can be congruence between what the goal intends and what the team members interpret. Maurice's 5th goal relates to self-advocacy and the assistive device that he uses for listening in the classroom. The goal is for Maurice to independently notify staff when he needs his FM microphone synced or turned on. The baseline and level of attainment again is vague and listed only as a percentage. We might assume that this is percentage of opportunities. For example, 0 means that he always needs reminders and does not independently make the request on any school day. The target is for him to build self-advocacy skills so that he can independently make this request on 70% of school days, which could look something like 3 out of 5 days one week and 4 out of 5 days the next week. Read the supplementary aids and services section to find out the needed accommodations or modifications for the learner. Ask questions if you see the phrase "as needed." Questions could be, under what specific conditions is this accommodation needed? What indicator should I look for to tell me that this service or aid is needed? Tell me about the kinds of activities or tasks that the student has been successful in completing with this support, aid, or service in the past. Maurice's IEP describes the 4 supplementary aids he requires to make learning accessible across school environments: preferential seating, closed captioning, educational interpreter, and assistive listening device. Note that the phrase "as needed" does not appear in this document. As needed is a legal pitfall, so if you see the phrase, flag it and be sure to ask the special education teacher to name specific conditions under which that aid or device is needed. The final section to pay attention to is the related services section. Read this section to see which services the child will receive from the following possibilities: occupational therapy, speech language therapy, physical therapy, school psychology services, social work services. This section will specify how often and where the services will be provided, for example, in the general education classroom or in a separate setting. Maurice's related services include 15 minutes per month with an audiologist in the special education classroom, all-day services from an educational interpreter, and special transportation to and from school. Your role is vital to the success of an IEP. The perspective you give, the actions you take, and the role you hold is one that can create opportunity, establish structure, ensure access to a quality education, and set a child on a path toward attaining goals that lead to a purposeful future.